androgens, this means the individuals cannot respond to T, testosterone. They lack the testosterone receptor, okay? So this individual, totally female phenotypically on the outside, but XY chromosomal. Yes? So they have SRY, they have TDF, they had all that, but they couldn't respond. Those cells did not have the little receptors that allow the trigger, the hormonal response, okay? This is partial. Partial insensitivity means they can respond. They have some receptors that are working. So this is a little bit more of what would be considered an intersex case that you could phenotypically see, because there's features of both. There's also another one, guaidosis, I'll get to that in a minute, and congenital adrenal hyperplasia. I feel like this is all very small and hard to see, so I go through each of these individually. Read these texts and read the supplemental article that I gave. It has a lot of great information and details about all of these different disorders of sex differentiation. So pseudo-hermaphroditism, or intersexuality, pseudo-hermaphroditism means kind of false hermaphrodite, having features of both male and female. Okay? Truly, most individuals are not hermaphrodites that have both testes and both ovaries, although that does happen. It's more rare. Usually the cases that we see of individuals are pseudo-hermaphrodites. So they have certain features of male and female sex. You can call it intersex. I know that's where everybody kind of labels it. The individual has ovaries or testes, but the accessory reproductive structures are not complete, or they don't match the genetic chromosomal sex. Yes? Okay. Female pseudohermaphroditism. Female pseudohermaphroditism can be due to excessive secretion of adrenal gland androgens. Remember, the adrenal cortex makes glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, and androgens, adrenal androgens like DHEAS, right? Some of these topics have come up in here again and again and again. You can guarantee I will test you. Those will be on the exam. I'll test you on those. Congenital adrenal hyperplasia means hyperplasia. There's an overproduction and overgrowth of the adrenal cortex. So that person's individuals is dumping out too much androgens, DHEAS and some of those other ones, dihydroepiandrosterone. So the effects on the female developing embryo, fetus, is that there's overexposure to androgens. So it masculinizes certain parts of the body. Less female breast tissue development, sometimes facial hair, body hair. Sometimes there's a micropenis or an enlarged clitoris. So there's features of that because of those androgens that are exposed during fetus. These individuals have both Mullerian and Wolffian duct derivatives, okay? Because they're having androgens coming from their adrenals. So normally the fetus of the female would not have androgens, but there's androgens. So it starts to androgenize some of those pathways inside and outside of the body. Male or male-like external genitals in general, okay? There's also testicular feminization syndrome, TFS. And there's another word for this really is complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. So TFS is also called complete androgen insensitivity or incomplete androgen insensitivity. So you'll see CAIS, ICAIS, okay? These are different variations or forms of testicular feminization syndrome. The testes of these individuals, they're XY, okay, chromosomally. They make T, their testosterone, from their testes, but the testosterone receptors do not work. The gene for this, the testosterone receptor, is called AR, the androgen receptor gene. Androgen receptor gene. Remember, testosterone is just a type of androgen. So they act on androgen receptors. Androgen receptor. It's on the X chromosome, actually. So that gene is on the X chromosome. Now notice if you are XY individual, you only have one X. Remember we talked about sex-linked diseases and disorders. Males are more often to have things like color blindness, male pattern baldness, some of these different things. If they're carried on the X chromosome and you have a mutation, a gene that's improper on that X chromosome, you have no other chromosome that has the gene that can compensate. So that's it. You have the genetic condition because you only had one shot. Bless you. So these individuals are XY, but they have a faulty androgen receptor gene. So they don't have the normal protein receptor, so they can't respond to androgens. They can't respond to T. So almost all of these individuals, I don't want to ever say all or every time or all the time because there's always exceptions, but in general, these individuals identify as female. Their gender is female. Female external genitals form. There's no uterus, there's no oviducts because Mullerian ducts degenerated. Okay? So they're XY. So they don't have the normal female plumbing in the inside. And there's female external genitals on the outside. Okay? And there's no male tract either because the Wolffian ducts were not stimulated to development. The Wolffian ducts need what hormone to develop? Remember, Mullerian female, Wolffian male. What do the Wolffian ducts need to develop? Testosterone. TDF initially, right? But ultimately the testes are pumping out T, and that's what makes all those masculine eyes. They don't have that, so there's no male tract, okay? And then up in the abdomen there are testes, because the Y chromosome has the SRY gene, and the SRY gene leads to TDF, and that causes testes to form. So there's no internal male or female, but there's testes, and there's external female genitalia. Truly intersex, if you want to qualify it that way. Just read this on your own. It goes through some of the differences of complete, partial, or incomplete, and MAS. I can't remember what that one is. I can't remember that one. The most two common are these, complete and incomplete androgen insensitivity. So if we look at this, an example of this, a female with this, there's breast tissue development. There's actually less body hair because body hair typically comes from androgens. So androgens will cause things like acne and hair, body and facial hair. Virtually hairless, don't have to wax, don't have to shave. I'm quite jealous of that actually. No shaving, none of all that. And female phenotypically, this is an individual of a woman. Example, she's been really outspoken and talked about it a lot. She has complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. She's XY, but her body is never exposed to testosterone, pretty much, because she can't respond to it. She doesn't have the receptors. There's a lot of models, actually, that are in this, have this sex development disease, because they tend to be taller, have less body hair, have breast development, have little acne to no hair in general. So there's a lot of feminized features to them in general. I don't know, there's a celebrity and actress, Jamie Lee Curtis. I think she's talked about this before. She might actually have complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. She's sterile, she's infertile, she adopted the kids of her husband. But there's a lot of examples of individuals that have talked about having that. The next intersex condition is guaidosis. This literally translates in Spanish. This is certain places in South America where we see this. It translates to penis at 11. Is it 11? I want to say 12. There we go, 12. So it's not so good. Penis at 12. Genetic condition, it's inherited, okay, so it's genetic. These individuals have the inability to make the enzyme 5-alpha reductase. This enzyme is critical for turning in testosterone into dihydrotestosterone, that DHT. Remember I talked about that DHT in the beginning, getting the internal male parts, okay, and the external parts. So 5-alpha reductase is an enzyme that these individuals are lacking, so they cannot convert testosterone into DHT. DHT is needed for masculinizing, especially the outer part of the body, the external genitalia, so the scrotum and the penis, okay? So these babies are born as phenotypic females, but again, they're XY, chromosomally male, born as females. If they cannot convert T into DHT, they have the internal male plumbing, but they don't have the external male parts. Yes? Okay, so mainly testosterone is required for the secondary sex characteristics and the enlargement of the genitals at puberty. So when an individual goes through puberty, a man, large surges of testosterone happen, and that really helps to masculinize the male body, increase the size of the genitals, muscle mass, facial hair, height, growth of the skeletal bones, all of that. So when these males are born, and they're in certain populations that we'll look at, that I'll talk about in a minute, they actually are raised as females, and then when they hit puberty, they switch from being females to being males. And it's perfectly accepted by society. This is a really interesting kind of rare example where they actually switch genders. Everybody knows it. It's kind of like they don't know, what's going to happen? Who knows? But they end up just converting at puberty. Oh, their genitals get masculinized, they get bigger in size. They actually sort of transform from female gender to male gender. And it's accepted by society. Many will go on and marry and have kids and families, and it gets passed on. It's a genetic It's a genetic condition. So, yeah, and I have it right here, sorry, I messed up. Penis at 12. So that's how it translates, and it's accepted. It is totally accepted. It's part of the cultural norm. Sometimes it's going to happen, sometimes not. So in this example, we have Maria, born, she's about age 12, and about 19, Maria is now Jorge, okay? And it's just, and a lot of times they'll change their gender identity, their name, their all that, and they will be sexually attracted to females, okay? So their sexuality and all that sort of just falls in line with that. Yeah, Sarah.
What happens in the U.S.?
Not that I know of, or very rare. These are isolated populations in South America, and it's a genetic familial inherited condition, so it's passed on and sort of maintained. But that I know of is not very common in the U.S. But it's an interesting example of intersex and going from like one sex to another, like in a span of a lifetime. So it's pretty interesting. This is showing the normal penis, the normal scrotum, testes, epididymis, vas deferens, prostate, all that, the spongy urethra. In a guevadosis male, there's a clitoris-like phallus, so like an enlarged clitoris, and testes, the internal plumbing is there, prostate's a little smaller, there's a blind vaginal pouch, but all of this sort of grows, descends down and drops and becomes masculinized at puberty, because DHT is needed to develop the external genitals during fetal development, but testosterone is needed to enlarge and grow everything at puberty. So this is how they can be sort of female, dormant male, and then become male at about 12 to 15. Intersex incidence is, you might not think it's that common, and of course you guys were all kind of well aware. I feel like at St. Mary's here we have a little bit more awareness and knowledge in some of these areas and some other circles that I've talked to. I was going to sidetrack, never mind. It's estimated to be about 1% of the world's population in intersex. That means chromosomal or genetic sex not exactly aligning with phenotypic physical sex, just purely talking about that. Not gender identity, not sexuality, I'm just saying biologically intersex. This is more common than Down syndrome, being redhead, and many other genetic or biological traits. Common. It's common. Let me keep going, because I've got to get through this. Many of the gender reassignment or reconstruction surgeries that are done on intersex babies are sometimes they were hidden from the parents or with consent of poorly informed parents. Didn't really explain to the parents what's going on or what it is, just that the genitalia is ambiguous or something's a little off and we got to reconstruct. And used to be done a lot in the 70s, 80s, 90s. They would clip, snip, and make that decision early on. Now that's not done as often, and there's a waiting and sort of figuring stuff out. Before, a lot of parents were not really informed, or it was done by the doctors without letting the parents know in an informed consent type way. But now most of the surgeries are actually done to reconstruct masculinized genitals of CAH females. And if you remember, these are the congenital adrenal hyperplasia females that have adrenal cortex that's overactive, okay? Now there's a lot of research, advocacy, a lot of science. Now we know that sex, gender, sexuality are actually a continuum and not just simple binary traits. We're going to get more into this later. Yes? Good? Okay, we'll continue this on Monday. We'll get into